Today we're going to be ending our mini-series by talking about healers, which ones are the best, which ones are the worst, in patch 7.3. This has sparked a lot of controversy because the meta is currently shifting. It's going away from melee cleaves and more towards casters, more towards like the dot casters and the destruction warlocks and the feral druids and all those types of people with just multi-dotting abilities. My name is Michael Hogman. I make a lot of guides and I keep you guys up to date with World of Warcraft news, and today we're going to be talking about the best and the worst healers in my opinion. Obviously this is just my opinion and it's also subject to change if there are buffs and nerfs, so just keep that in mind. But I'm going to take this video and I'm going to format it in a least to greatest best, like worst to best way. And coming off of the worst healer that I think is in this current patch, that is going to be the MISTWEAVER monk. The MISTWEAVER monk has had a lot of trouble lately because they honestly, guys, like they just go Their healing output's good. They're able to keep you guys alive through the arena. They're able to keep themselves alive pretty well. But the problem is that they go very, very quickly. They run out of mana. And I feel that players, and especially in healing, are valuing how much bang they can get for their buck. Like how much healing output can they get for amount of mana spent, and I feel that the MISTWEAVER monk is just extremely inefficient in terms of mana, and that's why people are kind of not playing it right now. I also think that the main comps that MISTWEAVER see are going to be like melee cleaves and turbos and stuff like that, and I feel that right now those comps are becoming a little bit more weaker in the meta, as you're seeing stuff like Shadow Priest, Feral Druid, Destruction Warlock, Affliction Warlock, those classes come to power again. That is also a huge point, is that those classes, whenever they get you to pop your trinket as a MISTWEAVER monk, you just die soon. Like it doesn't really matter what comp you fight against. If you do use your Gladiator's Medallion, pretty much anyone can swap to you with a stun and end up killing you in that stun, because MISTWEAVER monks are just so squishy right now, right? And that combined with the healing output does make, in my opinion, MISTWEAVER monks the weakest healer of them all. The next one that I do want to talk about is going to be the Disc Priest. So this is interesting because I was playing with RMP, right? I was playing Arcane RMP, and that's like a super popular comp. It did really well last patch, and it does have its viability this patch, but I do feel that Disc Priest overall, but just by playing with them in high ratings, from my experience, is that the multiple Disc Priests that I played with were really having trouble with putting out heals. They were able to put out, like, press all their buttons and be the Disc Priest that they wanted to be, and spec the way that they wanted to spec. But the problem is that eventually they would just fall behind in healing, and even though they were pressing their buttons right, they were doing everything that they could, it just feels like the Disc Priest right now, their numbers are just lower. It feels like the healing output that the Disc Priest can put out just really doesn't have enough to keep up with these comps like the Shadow Priest Affliction Warlock, or like the Shadow Priest Destro Warlock, or FLS, or whatever it is. And also, priests are really susceptible to being purged, and when you're fighting against 1 to 2 classes all the time that can purge and will purge you, their shields are going to be very minimal, and I feel that in particular does make Disc Priests very weak, is that when there are a lot of purges going out, Disc Priests are not going to be able to put out as much healing as they want. And I know you get the trade-off for damage, like you get some extra damage, but I think that other classes can put out the same amount of damage and way more healing, and also be way more mana efficient. Because another problem we had with Disc Priest is that he would basically run out of mana. He would just press all his buttons and be as efficient as he could as a Disc Priest and heal us up, and either we would either die or he would run out of mana and then we would die, and that was a big problem. But I do see Disc Priest having some light. I mean, if they do play with RMP and if they are just continuously offensive and they keep their team offensive, I feel that Disc Priests do have it, like its strengths, and I think that is still there offensively. I just think that they don't have enough healing to keep their team up. So you have to play a certain play style, like always moving forward, always having that momentum to move forward, and in that fashion you're going to be able to see some success with Disc Priest, but it's more so on the weaker scale. And the Holy Priest is actually the next one that I want to talk about, because I feel that Holy Priests, they're okay right now. Like, obviously I didn't rank them as like the lowest healer. I just feel that Holy Priests right now, like, they kind of struggle with keeping up with the spread pressure that teams can put out, And when you when you fight a lot of teams that are like feral, right, or feral, or if it's like even WLS or comps that can like pressure the Holy Priest while also pressuring several teammates in return, several of the Holy Priest teammates, I just feel that Holy Priest struggles with keeping up. Even though they are very mana efficient, they do have pretty solid healing output. I just think that Holy Priests are more so like they're revolving around like Ray of Hope and their artifact cooldown and Guardian Spirit, and like when those things are down, it just seems that they fall behind. And I think that they fall behind very quickly in this meta because of the amount of spread pressure that's going out. And again, even though they're pretty mana efficient, they do struggle with that. And I think that overall they just fall behind. And that's just a really big deal in this meta, is that you cannot play with healers that fall behind very quickly because you have a very slim chance to win a huge amount of games in a row, if that's the case. So here we go into the stronger healers, okay? Because this is going to be more so like talking about the ones that are doing well. And the very first one that I want to talk about is going to be on the same level. Actually, these two healers are going to be on the same level of power. I think that they're both good and about the same amount of strength. And that's going to be the Holy Paladin and also the Restoration Druid. So these two classes were really, really good in 7.2. They were very viable. They were used in nearly every team comp. And then in 7.2.5, they actually got huge nerfs. And that made it really hard for these players to play that class, those classes. Holy Paladin's melee wings got nerfed into the ground, and I made a video about that. And then also Restoration Druids were not doing so hot because their healing was just nerfed into the ground. Like, they were very, very bad at healing, and they could not keep up, similar to how Disc Priests are right now. And I feel that Restoration Druid and Holy Paladin both offer a stun that's pretty consistent, whether it's Bash or Hammer of Justice. Holy Paladins offer a little bit more damage with their melee wings, and since that's been buffed a few times, they are getting a lot more healing output, and they can also play the double Blessing of Sacrifice, double bop spec, and have that longer wings buff and keep that healing going. And I also think that Holy Paladins fit into the comps right now that are pretty strong in some way. Maybe not like FLS, but if they play like Holy Paladin, Shadow Priest, Destruction Warlocks, like Double Caster, Holy Paladin, that does pretty well because Holy Paladins can generally sit back and not be so threatened, so that they can stay mana efficient, they can keep you up, and when they do use like a Blessing of Sacrifice, it's hard for an enemy team to push in onto the Holy Paladin because then they'll just start falling behind in their health pools. Because of like the strength of the Shadow Priest and Warlock, right? So I think that is the niche that Holy Paladin fit in right now, is those double caster comps, and I think that Restoration Druid does really well in those comps as well. But I also think that Restoration Druid is kind of like the class that is doing pretty well because of like the strengths that it has, because of the CC it has, because of the overall healing output that it can put out. It has gotten a few buffs recently, and I think that Restoration Druid is doing pretty well right now. I just think that they struggle against teams that have a lot of purges, and I also think Resto Druids do go out of mana pretty quickly against these teams like Shadow Priest, Warlock, and FLS, and all these comps with these spread pressure things. I do think that they are definitely a little bit like in between, super strong and not so strong, but I feel like if they got like one more buff, whether that's healing output or whatever it is, I feel that Restoration Druids are very, very close to being on tier 1 again, just like they were in 7.2. And moving on to the very last healer, the strongest healer of them all, which is none other than the Restoration Shaman. This one is dominant. Like, this is the healer that can pretty much fit into any comp, and do pretty well. They have stuff like Earthshield that makes you pretty much like Earthshield in particular counters pretty much any bursty comps, such as like Windwalker Mage, RMP, or even like just melee cleaves. Like, it does pretty well against melee cleaves. It does pretty well against pretty much every comp out there, and I think it's just because they're so strong in healing. Whether they play Vim and Vigor or whether they play Defender of the Weak, like those both really, really like just they're so strong, and being able to have like Riptide going all the time on every target, and then also having just the immense amount of healing that they get from their healing waves and surges, I think that in combination with their like several defensive cooldowns, being able to electrocute spam and be very offensive and do a crazy amount of damage with that electrocute dot and purge them at the same time, that really does speak to just kind of being like the best well-rounded healer. And I feel that the Restoration Shaman is just dominant right now and has been for the last few months. And I hope to see a day where the other healers compare, because Restoration Shaman is just doing really well. And that makes it, the Restoration Shaman doing really well makes the other classes, like most of the melee classes that focus on single target, they make mages, they make a lot of these single target classes a lot weaker. And then they all, whenever Resto Shamans are good, that usually means that the spread pressure comps are, a little bit better, because that's just kind of how the meta works. Those classes, when one class is strong, it's the classes that synergize with that class. Usually those are the comps that do well. But that does pretty much sum up my power ranking, guys. I hope you really did enjoy this series where I did break down the strengths and weaknesses of every class for this current meta and this current time in the game, the first few weeks of 7.3 and Legion Season 5. If you did, feel free to leave a comment down below and let me know what your thoughts are on the healing ranks that I propose, the topics that I've brought up to discussion for you guys. I'd love to hear your opinion. If you feel that I'm right on this, or if you feel that I'm wrong, call me out. I'm always open to learning more about what you guys think, and I do appreciate you guys watching this video. If you do want to support the channel, you want to support this video, if you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a big thumbs up, and you can also subscribe to my YouTube channel for future videos, in which I will release tomorrow and the next day and the next day. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.